very important session on this conversation on war and peace in a fractured world. We've been going through a lot of conflict last 5 years. So there's a bit of good news this morning, which is Trump has called off the attack on Iran. Now, it was supposed to have taken place last night, but in the last minute, he's supposed to have withdrawn, and there seems to be some kind of a conversation between Tehran and Washington that seems to be happening. But then it's too small a straw in the wind. The challenge for us is, last 5 years, the war in Ukraine continues. You have, in Gaza, we've seen one of the most wrenching and horrendous conflicts over the last 3 years. There is a ceasefire of sorts that's barely holding. And now we've had Trump's intervention in Venezuela, and we thought the Iran thing was the next. But meanwhile, we have a conflict in Greenland as well. So no part of the world seemed to be spared from the kind of conflict that we've seen in the last few years. So what I'm going to do is we have a very, very experienced and knowledgeable panel, and we have tight sessions. So I'm going to start by asking each one of them a question. Maybe they'll answer for 5 minutes. Once we do the first round, we'll go into a second round and then open it up for questions. Maybe I'll start with you, Lindy. I think the fragmentation in the Middle East, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in Taiwan, the conflict in Latin America, were not unimaginable. There is a long, long history to it. But the idea that the West will fight with itself, that President Trump, who heads the NATO was designed to protect Europe against aggression, is actually demanding a part of European territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, which is really a founding member of NATO. So I think that there are divisions within the West, because we all in India imagine there is a single collective West. But what we're seeing is today an interesting fragmentation. So do you see this as temporary, or do you see the question of Greenland can be sorted out in the coming days?
So thanks, and it's wonderful to be here, and also really lovely, not just to be back at the Jaipur Lit Fest, but also to see so many old friends and colleagues in the audience as well, and to be on a panel with such a great group of diplomatic colleagues. So the first thing I would say is, look, in a framing sense, the world is definitely more volatile than it has been. I'm immensely grateful to be working for a Prime Minister whose view is we should engage with the world as it is, not the world as we wish it to be. And therefore we are engaging with a world that is more volatile and complex. But here, sitting in India, as the British High Commissioner to India, I think the last year in our relationship has proved that actually it is possible in a pragmatic world to get on and do great things. The UK-India relationship is at, in honesty, an all-time high. We signed a trade deal last year. My Prime Minister visited India with a massive business delegation. Prime Minister Modi visited the UK to sign the deal. We are getting on with working in the world as it is and building the relationships that we think we need for the future, including between the UK and India. And I think more generally, we don't think isolationism will help. We believe that actually we ought to get out there and help engage in international cooperation. We believe still very much in joint action. We believe very much in international law, and the UK is very committed to that, and I think that's very important. But I think on your specific question, I would reject the concept that I think there is a rift. The US remains the UK's closest security ally. They are absolutely critical for our defence and security, and the special relationship is part of our security. I think the world, as I say, is volatile, and I think that it's complicated, but there are areas where we are still working together. I would say that, for example, the President's peace plan for Palestine, the really critical 20-point plan that has brought to an end 2 years of unimaginable suffering for the Palestinian people, but also for the families and victims who suffered in that awful terrorist attack. The second one, I think, is Ukraine, where we see the need for the international community to come together to bring to an end a conflict that has now lasted for longer than Russia's participation in the Second World War, where actually we see the suffering again, and we need that. And the UK, in a third one that is often not talked about enough, the UK drafted a resolution recently in the Human Rights Council to demand an end to the conflict in Sudan, a forgotten conflict where people are suffering horribly every day and where external parties again are helping to fan those flames. So I think there is much we can still do. It is complex, but our job is actually to get on and engage.
Thanks. Turning to May-Elin, Norway is a member of NATO. We've seen the war in Ukraine is going to enter complete 4 years next month. Now, in that, there too are some divisions within Europe. Now, if Trump says, look, Europe must take care of itself, where do you see, can the Europeans really defend Ukraine on their own? Is it possible? I see there's some plans for rearming in Germany and a whole lot of countries. So is that a fantasy that Europe can defend itself, or is something we're going to see unfold in the next few years?
Well, thank you very much for your question, and let me also say it's great to be here. It's my third time now at Jaipur Litfest, and I really enjoy it every time, every hour, every day. So that's great. And we are discussing a very serious and important issue here at this panel. And let me just start also by saying last year, the United Nations were 80 years old. The United Nations is created by people who had experienced not only one war, but 2 wars. They thought UN is a good pathway to peace. And this is what we are discussing also here today. And one of the basis and the real basis for the United Nations, the UN Charter, is sovereignty of each nation. And this is the principle that we have been living on and that we still think is really important for all of us. So I would just like to say that also, just to echo my colleague Lindy here, UK is also really one of our closest allies as a small country, Norway, and I really also believe in what she's saying, that well, we still need to cooperate, we still need to trade, and it's important that we do that. It's important that we do it with India, and it's important also that we listen to the most populous country when we look at reform of the UN, which is needed to face the challenges that we are, and also reforms of the trade system. Norway is leading the process on reform in the World Trade Organization, and this is an important process that people might not know that well, but it's an important pathway to peace also. So then to your question about Ukraine, then I'm also back to the UN Charter and sovereignty. Because Russia's war on aggression against Ukraine is a blatant violation of the UN Charter. Its stakes are quite high here. I have heard somebody say, if Russia stops fighting, the war will stop. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine will cease to be. And this is why this is important for Ukraine, and it's important, it's also why we need to support Ukraine. They are not only defending their own country, they are defending these very principles that are important for all of us. So there are important and good attempts being made, and we support those for peace talks. But Ukraine has to be part of the talks. And as Norway, we are supporting that. We are also supporting that Ukraine. That we are also supporting Ukraine militarily, also humanitarian and on energy security, which is crucial for them to actually just defend their country.
Stay with Europe, and I'll go to Kevin, the ambassador of Ireland. Ireland is neutral. I mean, for a long time, India and Ireland, we used to be part of a group called neutral and non-aligned countries. So there are a lot of things which Ireland and India did on the global stage in the second half of the 20th century. But today, as a neutral country in Europe, nobody expected war to come to Europe again. But there you are in the middle of this huge war in Ukraine that has gone on for nearly 4 years. So where do you see, is there a room for peace there? Do you see that unfolding a reasonable chance as we enter the 5th year of the Ukraine war?
Well, first of all, Raja, thank you so much for this, and it's so great to see people who are more interested in geopolitics than Stephen Fry across the lawn. But look, I'm really happy to be here. Yes, so to your question about neutrality, well, First of all, I'll just say a little bit that Irish people are very attached to our neutrality. We're in a shrinking club now when it comes to Europe, because we've seen, as a consequence of Russia's war of aggression, that some of the neutral nations have joined NATO. But I suppose, and Lindy will forgive me for saying, maybe 800 years as part of empire and with a struggle for independence has actually led to a deep-seated commitment to that kind of independence and neutrality. I became very aware of that myself, actually, in a previous role. I was Director of Communications in the Foreign Ministry, and we had a very interesting process, which was a national consultation on security and defense policy. And this is a very foreign policy, wonky type topic. My goodness, the level of interest, engagement, protests, and it was all because people felt that there was some kind of threat to our neutrality, which wasn't on the cards. So for us, it was a very useful exercise because it forced us to have a discussion about what neutrality means. And I think as a consequence of that, but it's an ongoing debate and discussion, we're very much, and the Ukraine war has brought it, the Russia's war on Ukraine has brought it very close to our minds that we may be militarily neutral by choice, but we are not politically neutral. And so what we try to talk about as the Irish government is a very active form of neutrality. And that can be a challenge for us, but it's something that I think my government is very, very committed to. So how do we do that? Well, it is about retreating back to our core values, some of those that were mentioned by May-Elin. It's about the importance of rule of law, its importance of institutions, the importance of the United Nations and multilateralism. And I think as a small country like Ireland, we don't have the luxury necessarily to be in this, to buy into this new doctrine of might is right. We have to instead retreat and be committed advocates of diplomacy. So yes, it's a desperate situation, a war in Europe. Of course, as Ireland, we've been very aware of conflict and our own experience of conflict, but internationally, we've been also very active in terms of conflict resolution. But I don't think any of us really thought that this invasion on Ukraine, which is a country that probably many Irish people didn't know much about, would have such an impact on us. But I mean, we're a small country. We took in about 130,000 Ukrainians. We've been very active politically supporting them. And now, as we take on our presidency of the European Union, at the second half of this year, we're going to be a solid champion for Europe, for Ukraine to be a member of the European Union. And for us, even though we have, of course, connections with NATO through the Partnership for Peace, for us, we see our future and our security, and Ukraine's future is within the European Union, which is guided by these kind of rules and rule of law and a commitment to multilateralism.
Thank you, Kevin. I think turning to Abdullah, Ambassador of Palestine, I mean, we've seen horrible stuff in the last 3 years in Gaza, but we've had a ceasefire of some kind in the last few months. We saw the Washington last night saying the first phase of the Gaza peace plan is done, and there are going to be announcements this week or early next week on the second phase of the Gaza peace plan. So how do you see the first phase implementation? Are you satisfied with it? And what are the prospects for the second phase, which will move from a ceasefire to actually reconstruction and a whole range of disarmament and other areas?
Thank you so much indeed, Raj, and I would like to extend many thanks to the organizer of course, this festival, this very important gathering indeed, and to extend many thanks, of course, to my distinguished colleagues here. You said something, but I know that time is very limited because you said just the last 3 years. No, the misery that we are enduring, it was started, unfortunately, November 2nd, 1917, by issuing, of course, as you all know, the Balfour Declaration, which at that exact time, our misery as Palestinians was started. But again, because Gaza was in the eye of the storm for the last 3 years, I will go back directly to your question. Yes, the first phase was announced, or the second phase was announced to be started just yesterday by Witkoff, the American man. For the first phase, because we are talking about 3 phases, or Trump plan. It's not peace plan. It's called comprehensive plan to end the conflict in Gaza, which is completely different when it came to the peace plan, because wording have a meaning. As someone who was spent 8 years in the United Nations, and we used to be very extra careful when it came to the wording. But again, the first phase was ended. And when it came to the first phase, we know that it was the main title of the first phase was return the hostages, the Israeli hostages, some of the Palestinian prisoners or hostages, because they are also hostages, and of course the remains of the Israeli hostages, which was killed at the hand of the Israeli occupation itself, then the humanitarian aid. Unfortunately, yes, it happened, and we are very happy, and the President Abbas was very clear, cluster clear from the very beginning regarding the Israeli hostages. They even should not be taken from the ground even. But when it came to the humanitarian aid, unfortunately, Israel did not abide by the humanitarian aid. Up to yesterday, 1,244 violation of the ceasefire was conducted by Israel. 449 Palestinians was killed. Approximately, according to the United Nations, UNICEF in particular, 2 days ago, issued a press statement, said that in average, 1 child has been killed since the announcement of the ceasefire each day, 1 child. But again, when it came to the second phase, which was again announced just yesterday by Witkoff, this stage is again very important stage, just to say that this stage is to demilitarize Hamas, and to just, I'm gonna take some a bit more time. When it came to demilitarize Hamas, was the Palestinian request, the Palestinian official request, and unfortunately, the one who refused that, the one who strengthened the legs of Hamas in Gaza is the current Israeli Prime Minister, current fugitive from justice Israeli Prime Minister. But again, when it came to the second phase, it was started yesterday. In this phase, we are looking to establishing the technocrat government, and the technocrat government was already established, and there is an agreement from the Israeli. There is no red line from the Israeli or blocking from the Israeli, the American, and just yesterday they arrived to Cairo. Today they will have, I think, the first meeting of them. All the Palestinian political faction will come the establishment of this technocrat committee. We are looking also to engage in the third phase. In the third phase, there should be the most important issue should be in a political horizon for the future of the Palestinians. But again, we are very optimistic, and we will come the Trump plan and in the pace of 2 things. First and foremost, we will come it because we want at that time, September, by the end of September, at the mid of September when it was announced, to make sure that there is no more Palestinian will be killed in a daily pace. At least in average 100 to 100 Palestinians used to be slain and killed and targeted in Gaza. So that it was the very first thing. Then, because we believe that it's time at that time to end the famine that was struck Gaza, according to the United Nations, and harvest and killed many of our children. And very important issue before I end, because we believe at that time, it's time that no more surgery, medical surgery, be conducted in Gaza without anesthesia. Thank you.
Thank you. We really hope this year. We really hope this year, at least, both in Ukraine and Gaza and Palestine in general, we'll see probably a march towards a little less conflict and more peace. Lindy, coming back to you, if you're looking at the conflicts as a whole, one of the new features of modern conflict has been technology. I mean, technology always had effects on war, but I think the emergence of new technologies like AI, data integration into warfare, the rise of drone warfare, the use of, we've seen some American companies like Palantir, which really using AI techniques, both in Gaza as well as in Ukraine, are really moving towards actually a much more lethal form of conflict. We saw that a bit in the Op Sindoor, in our own conflict, where actually you seen you're dead. I mean, there was no great physical exchange of actual combat. But I think the power of remote warfare, using technology, using cyber warfare. So you followed these issues for a long time. Maybe you could tell us, to our audience, where do you see the impact of technology on warfare and how that is unfolding?
Thank you. So, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is we often underestimate, we often think the world we're in at the moment is changing faster than the world we used to be in. 125 years ago, there was a raging debate about whether it was okay to drop bombs from balloons, before the advent of airplanes. We've been debating new technology in warfare for centuries now. But it always feels, frankly, it feels scary because things are changing and people can't anticipate how it will look. I am fundamentally a tech optimist. I fundamentally believe that new technology has more to offer the world, whether that's in the invention of new drugs, to deal with healthcare challenges, whether that's in terms of the potential for AI. I fundamentally believe that there are always risks, but there are often, there are almost always huge upside possibilities as well. And that's why actually the UK has also been at the forefront of thinking about safety and security in AI. We ran the first AI summit. We're really looking forward to the next one this year in India. And one of the things we focused on was how it is you build safety and security into AI right from the beginning, how you think about that up front. It's one of the things that really mattered to me. I was previously the CEO of the National Cybersecurity Centre, and it was absolutely fundamental to think about how people could plan for the things that might go wrong and work out how they could build in their own security before rather than feeling like a victim, I think. So it's something we have to do at a human level, at an individual level. It's also something I think we have to think about as societies and systems. But fundamentally, I really do believe that there is more new technology can offer us, but it takes societies a while to adapt and change and to understand the challenges that will bring. And I think that's what you saw last year.
When coming to you, May-Elin, Norway has had a great tradition of peacemaking. We saw the original peace process in the Middle East was called the Oslo peace process. We know the Norwegians came here in the Sri Lankan conflict, but actually on the Tamil versus the Sinhalese conflict in Colombo, there again, you played a big role. Plus, you give the Nobel Prize. Though these days, it seems those who got Nobel Prize are being forced to hand it over to other people. But I think there is a long tradition. But given the environment we are in, is Oslo still as enthusiastic, or you're caught up in your own wars? Because until now, Europe was peaceful, the rest of the world was at war. So Norway, as a good Scandinavian tradition, could do peace. But is that phase over?
Well, thank you. Let me just say first, as a comment to what Lindy said about AI and development of technologies. This is also an area where we need a rules-based order. So I would just like to say or commend India for taking leadership also by having hosting the AI summit next month.
18th and 19th of February, we're going to have a big international summit in Delhi on artificial intelligence. That's what
yeah, so I just wanted to say that, and then of course on the peace and reconciliation, it's a fractured world, and we are seeing more wars. We are seeing very rapid solutions, at least suggestions for very rapid solutions, and we will just fix it and then try to fix it. The long-term thinking, the way of working, just being a neutral mediator, like Norway has had the tradition for being, is on the face of it less in demand. But you are using the word enthusiastic. Of course, it's not possible to be enthusiastic about the world as it is now, but we must be still engaged. And I think maybe even we must be more engaged. And if we take a step back, the need for quiet diplomacy, for back channels, for looking at long-term solutions, behind-the-scenes negotiations between parties of a conflict is even bigger when we see more wars. And Norway has that tradition, and we are enthusiastic about presenting that option for those who'd also like to use the experience that we have. So in that sense, we are no less enthusiastic, and we really cannot lose hope, even if it looks gloomy. There are also good developments, as has already been mentioned here by my Palestinian colleague, not the least. We have to support those developments, but also we have to look at what can we do behind the scenes, behind all the noise. There is also need for work to be done.
Coming to you, Kevin. We always think wars really affect countries, right? It is between countries. Economy gets affected, military power gets affected. But what we've seen in the case of the Middle East conflict is really its resonance within the Western societies. That actually this was just not about America versus Palestine, or it is the West versus Middle East. But actually you had massive protests within American or Western universities. There is a lot more empathy for Palestine within Western civil societies. There were more protests probably in the developed world than in the developing world on what has happened in Palestine. So how do you, because this has affected Europe in very interesting ways. You remember where Britain, the 2003 Gulf War, Iraq, where actually had a deep effect on British domestic politics, and continues to resonate today, the role of Tony Blair and the Labour Party at the time. So how do you see this war in Gaza, now even Ukraine? I would say you have actually the rise of new right-wing in Europe. Some of them are pro-Russian, some of them are, taking you pro-US. It's a very messy situation. So how do you see these wars affecting countries like US and Europe more broadly?
No, thank you for that. Look, absolutely, I agree with that observation. For a long time, perhaps, diplomats like us could sit in an office or write a telegram and worry about something very far away. Now we're required to engage with our own publics in a way in which we never had to do before. And I know that from our own country, where we invest as much time communicating foreign policy in Ireland to Irish people and what we're doing and what we're not doing as we spend communicating and promoting Ireland abroad. So in relation, well, let's just talk, you talked about Ukraine, but maybe just mention on the Gaza and the Middle East. For us, and I think not just for Ireland, it's no longer just a foreign policy issue. This is a domestic policy issue in Ireland. It has a huge impact. It influences political party platforms. It's influencing public sentiment. It's mobilizing voters. It's bringing young people out and engaged in public policy in a way which didn't perhaps happen in the past. You'd have a very niche group, people like me when I was a university student out marching on Saturdays, but now it's very much part of the wider discourse. And I think in some ways we can welcome that, because I think it calls on our governments to kind of explain more our positions and to engage. I think it places immense pressure on governments to be able to respond to these kind of growing demands. And I think it's a good thing that young people are actually being involved in a way in which they weren't before. I would say when it comes to Ireland, which you asked about, unlike perhaps some other European countries where mobilization has perhaps been marginalized or looked at in a negative way, I think it has probably in Ireland reinforced rather than destabilized democratic debate, and it has forced the government to be, to kind of for policymakers to kind of maintain that trust between institutions and citizens. We just had a presidential election, I'll stop very briefly, in Ireland. And I would say, of course, all the usual issues, homelessness, lack of housing, healthcare, they were on the agenda. The biggest issue was Palestine and the Middle East and what the candidates felt about it. So for us in Ireland, you know, it hasn't been necessarily an easy task for our government, because it's not something that the Irish government wants to ignore. It's something that runs across party lines, and it's also very complex because it has brought us into difficulties with Israel. And we also know, of course, the US and our relationship with the US is so important to us. So it's a very challenging tightrope that our political leaders need to walk.
Yeah. Abdullah, coming to Palestine, you know, we've seen so much suffering in the last few years. But I think there is, on the upside, if you will, I mean, on the positive side, we seem for the first time the separation of West Bank and Gaza, you know, which had gone, Gaza went under Hamas control while Palestinian Authority was still the legitimate representative. Now with return in the second phase and hopefully in the third phase, you see the Palestinian Authority coming back into Gaza, working with the other Arab countries to say, look, to restore measure of unity between Gaza and West Bank, so that you are able to better navigate the negotiation with Israel and others.
Thank you so much indeed. Again, it's my responsibility, of course, political responsibility and diplomatic responsibility to shed light on the reason why there is a fraction, why there's a division, why this rift between the Palestinians, because it was in the interest of the Israeli current fugitive from justice prime minister, and it was a clear-cut, declared position, declared policy from him. Anyone want to prevent the two-state solution, want to make sure that there is no two-state solution, should continue maintain the rift between the Palestinian people, so that one of the issues that still had been accused, he had been accused among the Israeli society themselves, that he is the one who strengthening the legs of Hamas in Gaza. And it's in Google, anyone can check, just Google the Qatarian money that was not a smuggle, it was came in a bags to Gaza by the permission of the Israeli Prime Minister himself, the one who enforced us as a Palestinian authority to pay the electricity bill that was collected by Hamas, finance Hamas, was again the Israeli Prime Minister. But again, yes, we as a Palestinian, we have a chronic problem among us as a Palestinian society, and we should tackle it from within our own, and this is our responsibility. We in the Palestine Liberation Organization, Palestinian Authority, President Abbas, day and night calling for the united of the Palestinian political faction. This unification should come under one flag or under one umbrella, which is the PLO itself. And anyone would like to engage in the upcoming election, he should be abide by the PLO itself. So that, yes, it might be what happened in Gaza might be another a way or another a window for hope for the Palestinian people. But there should be clear-cut condition or clear-cut intention from the Israeli side. Yes, they are intended to have or to engage in a political horizon. All the indicators that came up today, they are not intending, they are not interested in having any political horizon, especially when it came to the West Bank unification and the two-state solution, which is the only resolution that accepted by the international community at large, except Israel itself. Again, yes, we have a window of opportunity. No. We will look forward to utilize it, but to do so, we should not stand again alone as a Palestinian, very fragile people in front of the Israeli occupation. And to be very frank, which is completely, utterly supported by the American administration right now. The international community, if they are interested to do something, and they are interested, but in the theoretical level. And back to what my distinguished colleague here say, which I can conclude it by saying no one is safe until everyone is safe. once you accept the trampling of the international law in Gaza, this textbook genocide, televised genocide, you accepted it, no one of us will be safe. So that it's time for the international community to move from theoretical level to practical level, and there is many ways that if the international community, in particular the Western country, took these steps, the Israeli occupation will come to its end within less than 3 months.
Thank you. I think we ask questions. So, yeah. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think all the four of us have spoken eloquently about the issues of war and peace that affect us today. So maybe we'll take one round of 3 questions, and then we'll see how long we can go, because I see she's already we're running out of time. So there.
Sir.
Yeah, quickly, yeah.
Sir, I want to ask the panel
Just
that
keep it brief.
How effective are the special envoys like Steve Witkoff vis-a-vis the career diplomats, and why US is relying too much on them? And whether the Ukraine issue could have, just your response on why these special envoys when there is a whole fleet of career diplomats?
Normally, career diplomats don't like special envoys, but that's a different story. But I'm just going to take 3 questions in a row. Yeah, the young lady there. Yeah, please. The one behind you.
Thank you.
So keep it brief.
Yes. I have a question for Ambassador May and for Ambassador Cameron. You quoted Secretary of State Blinken to say if Russia stops fighting, the war ends. But, if Ukraine stops fighting. I want to know that for most of the Western world, why the same logic did not extend to Israel, that if Israel stops fighting, the war ends. But if Palestine stops fighting, then Gaza doesn't. Yeah? That's the question to you.
Yeah, one question. Yeah. Thank you. There's a lady there, please. Yeah, there, right behind. Yeah, you please. Yeah. You'll get the microphone. No, just this lady next to you. Ma'am, keep it brief.
Sorry, thank you. So I am from the Western world, and we've seen our politicians basically sell us out. And my question is, international law has been sacrificed over the Palestine exception. What role can international law play in moving forward, and does international law still matter these days?
Yeah, Trump said he only goes by his own law, but that's one part of the problem today. But I'm going to take these 3 questions to the panel. Maybe we'll come from the other end. Kevin, Abdullah, May, and Lindy, maybe quickly we can respond to.
Well, thank you. I won't answer the second question because I don't think it was directed at me. The first question, career diplomats versus special envoys. Of course, career diplomats are much better. Of course I'm going to say that. No, joking aside, of course there are benefits to the appointment of special envoys. We do it in the European Union as well, because a special envoy can be very dedicated to a particular cause and have complete access to the principles. And I think that is a model of working. But of course, I'm always going to stand up for career diplomats. And very briefly, because of time, international rule of law is under threat. Very much so. We see it with the terrible threats and attacks that the International Criminal Court, for example, is facing. It's something that I very much know as being a former ambassador in the Netherlands, and the threats that court is facing. That's why we, as states parties, need to double down and invest in international rule of law and be very clear that leaders will come and go, but unless we protect the institutions and the rule of law, we're having a problem. I better stop there.
Abdullah, briefly, yeah. We're going to run out of time.
Thank you so much again. Yes, special envoys is very important because this is part of the mechanism that even in the United Nations we used to use it for many problematic issues worldwide and economic issue also. But to be effective or not effective, it depends on whether he's coming to implement his own country policy, utilize the misery of the people for his own country policy, or he will came to utilize and to adopt the international law. This is the most important issue, and this is the more the most critical role when the special envoy came to adopt and to play a neutral role based on the international law adopted resolution. He will be very effective and he will do a great job. But if he came to play other role, it will become disaster. Regarding why this logic is applied on X but not apply on Palestine, let me just remind you, 30,000 different type of sanctions had been taken against Russia. Israel, 0 type of sanctions had been taken against it. Not only this, please. Each one here, with all due respect to my colleagues saying that Israeli settlement is against the international law. But unfortunately, the Israeli settlement product is flooding their shelf and their market in their countries. This is the point. This is the double standard. This is the hypocrisy again. If we move from double standard, hypocrisy, moving from the theoretical level to practical level, again, Israeli occupation will not stand for the upcoming 3 months. Just one thing. We have this experience. We have it. Regarding, I know time is very limited. Does the international law apply or work? It should be, because again, if there is no one is safe until everyone is safe. What happened in Gaza in the last 3 months is reflecting itself right now in Europe, and it will not stop there. Thank you.
Well, let me answer the one question directed directly to me. Why does not the same rules apply to Israel as they do to Russia? They do. The same rules applies to Israel. The same rules on respecting sovereignty. The same rules on respecting human rights law, humanitarian law. As Norway, we have been criticizing Israel for not respecting humanitarian law in Gaza, and we have been also very supportive, I must say, of the Palestinians in this conflict. We have also supported the Palestinian state, and we really believe that there will be no solution in the Middle East if there is no two-state solution, and we really believe that there can be no double standards in international politics. The same rules do apply to Russia as to Israel, as to also other states, and we do base ourselves on the UN Charter.
Lindy, yeah.
So 3 points, I think, to try and answer some of the questions. So the first one is, I think envoys exist because prime ministers have to have trust in the people they send to negotiate these issues. These are fundamental issues. And actually, we have a system which has heavily relied on professional diplomats, for which I'm very grateful, though I have quite a complicated background. But actually, it's important prime ministers have a choice. It's important prime ministers have a choice about that. And I think, therefore, you see a mix. The US system has always used more politicians. The second thing is international law absolutely still matters. I think that is a matter not for debate. It's something that is very important for our Prime Minister, who has a background in law himself, and it's something that we hold very, very dear and from some tough and bitter experience. I think that the third thing is just, I would go to the Russia-Ukraine context and say, the point that May-Elin made earlier is really important, which is this is a really simple issue. Russia invaded a sovereign country. There is no complexity to this issue. It is not complicated or difficult. It was the invasion of a sovereign state, and that's partly, I think, why the debate is so important to get right. Since we're at a book festival, my final point would be there is an amazing book actually on some of these issues, which I read a few years ago, one of my favorites, which is Philippe Sand's book, East-West Street, which actually describes how in many ways Ukraine was the birthplace of many of these contexts because it was so fought over in the Second World War. Some of the lawyers whose families emerged from those awful moments were the people who conceptualized some of the principles that we still hold dear to today.
Thank you. I think, there is a saying about ambassadors. Ambassadors are normally very, very cautious. Ambassadors are defined as you take the longest time to say nothing. Right? I mean, that's the general, with apologies to all of you. But I think what you saw in the last 45 minutes, really all of our panelists, all ambassadors, have really touched on very, very challenging and difficult issues that today confront all of us. It's a pity that we don't have too much time, but I think what we've seen in the last 45 minutes is one, raising questions about war and peace in the Middle East, in the heart of Europe, in Greenland, the question of international law, the question of territorial expansionism. All these are really huge trends that are unfolding. But I think they've also given us the message, I think, despite the very, very grim situation that we confront today, in the end, it is human agency, human action, individuals, groups, and collectives and nations that we all need to work to build that peace. And I would say there is actually, amidst all the confusion that is going around, there's still, I think, room for political action. And what we'll see in the few months, hopefully, is going to be that political quest for peace, some of which at least is likely to be successful. And you've been such an engaged audience. Thank you, and please give a big hand to our panelists.